Hey guys, so what I want to talk to you about today is sleep. It's a big topic. We all know that we need sleep. We all know that we should sleep, and we all have a general idea about how much we should be sleeping, but it's a huge issue for people at the same time, and no amount of knowing what is good for you necessarily allows you to install and act out of healthy sleeping behaviors. And I just want to unpack this topic a little bit more and look at the reasons for sleep, so some really good reasons to make sure that you are getting sleep, and then just giving some really general, really basic tips about sleep hygiene and how to kind of encourage a proper environment for healthy and regenerative sleep to happen. So I know for me as a naturopath, it's very rare that I see a client who doesn't have issues around sleep. And when I do have a client who doesn't, it's a bit of a shock, and it's a bit of a hallelujah moment, because that's fantastic. And it's just so common for there to be issues around sleep. And where sleep can be causal, so not sleeping can be a cause or a trigger for other follow-on symptoms or diseases or states of not so well-being. But sleep can also be a symptom of some other chronic disease or an acute infection or something that's being experienced, like stress or whatever. It can be a symptom of something that is happening in the life or happening in the body or in the system that is causing the sleep to degenerate. But the thing with this is that it often then goes into this vicious cycle. So there's something happening, say you're stressed, environmentally or physically through disease. Your body is under a certain amount of stress, and because of that stress, your circadian rhythm is thrown out of balance. So your cortisol isn't peaking and falling away when it should, and melatonin isn't taking over and peaking and falling away when it should. That circadian rhythm becomes upset, with cortisol peaking and spiking and falling away all over the place and interrupting that natural flow and that natural rhythm that takes us through waking through the day and sleeping through the night. And because that is interrupted, and usually it's by stress, and again, stress can be I'm actually stressed by my workplace environment, or stress can be I'm run down, or I'm not exercising enough, or I'm emotionally stressed or emotionally impacted, or I've been using my brain a lot at school. Whatever that stress is, it has the ability to interrupt and interact with and interfere with these very natural ebbs and flows of energy and sleep that are meant to happen for all of us. So once that rhythm is upset and it's interrupted, then your body isn't going into regeneration mode. It isn't taking the time that it needs to regenerate and refuel and reset, which offsets a lot of the stress and the impacts that we have experienced through the day. And if that sleep isn't happening, then that stress accumulates. So then through the next day, you're experiencing more stress, intensified stress. And it's not just the stress of that day, it's the stress of that day and the day before, and however many days before that you weren't appropriately getting into that deep regenerative, restorative sleep state. So it's this impacting, it's a compounding effect when you're not allowing yourself, or you're inhibited, your sleep is inhibited, because sometimes it's not that you're not allowing yourself, sometimes it's that things are really out of balance and it just isn't able to happen. So then that feeds that cycle. Stress, not sleeping, more stressed, more not sleeping, even more stress and even more not sleeping, and it accumulates, and a lot of people end up in a chronic state of deprivation, sleep deprivation, and in a chronic state of stress because of this, and because of an inability to regenerate and to reset, because of being stuck in this vicious cycle. And it's not always easy breaking people out of that cycle, but the first thing that always needs to happen is looking at the stress that is accumulating and that is causing the sleep deprivation and assisting the body to overcome that stress. And sometimes that's looking at environmental factors and what needs to change in that person's life, so ensuring that they're eating properly, that they're exercising enough, that they're getting sunlight, that they're disconnecting from technology and connecting with the land, that they're spending time meditating and putting these things in place that are going to help to offset the impact of the stress. And then short term, a lot of the time, what's required is physiological assistance to get that person to go into a state of sleep. So helping them to actually go to sleep. And then this, in combination with time, usually ends up being enough to break a person out of that stress, no sleep cycle, because they are actually getting put to sleep for a certain period of time, and it's not necessarily going to be deep, restorative, regenerative, really, really tasty, juicy sleep. But if we continue to offset the symptoms of stress and curb that stress cycle through the day, then that's going to contribute, and it kind of feeds itself in that way. Just as you can get stuck into a vicious cycle of degradation with sleep and stress, once you start impacting one in a positive way and in a positive direction, it too will then go into a positive healing cycle if it keeps being fed appropriately. And eventually, with most people, the natural cycle, so that natural ebb and flow of hormones that is excitement, wakefulness, and rest and regeneration, will be able to take over, but with time and with work. But I just want to talk about some of the, I've stumbled across some of the latest research in understanding sleep and the role of sleep and what happens in the sleep state. And I feel that this is important for people to be able to understand, because it explains a lot of what we experience on that physiological level, but also really highlights the importance of ensuring that if we're not sleeping, then we're at least doing something about it to try to improve it and get that sleep state happening. And what's been discovered, I mean, it's always been understood that the purpose of sleep is regeneration, clearing, resetting, and integrating new information. But what this latest research is beginning to explore and understand is that from the age of, being born, so from the time that you're born till the time that you're about 2.5 years old, the sleep state is predominantly, or more significantly, made up of REM sleep, so restless eye movement sleep, than when you're older than 2.5 years old. And what's happening in that first 2.5 years of life, and why infants need to sleep so much, is that in that REM sleep, there's this accelerated and massive turnover that's happening on a brain level that's allowing the brain to develop. There's an enormous amount of brain development, so the development of neural pathways and learning and integrating that learning, and what does that mean, and what is that color, and that kind of exploration and the building of the brain that's happening in that first 2.5 years of life. And that is the sole purpose of the sleep. The baby needs to go to sleep so that the baby can build its brain in this way and build its understanding and its comprehension of the world around it. And that's very much what the sleep state is about in that first 2.5 years. And what they're finding now, and they're surprised by how early this turnover is happening, by about 2.5 or 3 years old, that REM sleep decreases. And what they're finding is that instead of the sleep state becoming about building, brain building on that cellular level, the sleep state becomes more about damage control, which is really interesting. So instead of it being about building new, it becomes about regeneration and clearing away debris and things that don't serve, basically. And that becomes the purpose, the primary purpose, not the only purpose, but the primary purpose of our sleep from about the age of 2.5 or 3 years old. And what's come to be understood, and what we're going to suggest here, is that there's a low level damage that's occurring on the brain level just by being awake. So just by being in that awakened state, by living your life. It's just a natural side effect of being alive. As neurons fire and thoughts are made and hormones are secreted and signals and messages are sent, and as we move our heads around and bang them into things, and as we get stressed, and as we eat, and sometimes we don't eat very well, and as we're going about our day, damage is literally occurring on that physical brain level. And what this damage results in is, well, basically damaged DNA, so damaged genetic matter, and damaged proteins. And because the brain, the lymphatic system, which is responsible for drainage and the clearing and the cleansing of toxins on a physical level, because the brain isn't plugged directly into the lymphatic system, so the lymphatic system does not go into the brain and does not move through the brain in the way that it moves through all our other organs and our other systems, it's the movement of the spinal fluid into the brain, around, and then out of the brain, down through the spinal cord, that is responsible for the removal of toxins and debris that's being accumulated in the brain through day-to-day activities, which I find very interesting, because this process cannot occur while we're awake. That's not going to happen while we're awake and while we're moving around and interacting with the world. On a systemic level through the rest of our body, the lymphatic system is stimulated by movement. So us being awake and us moving around and interacting with life, it's creating toxins, because there's always the breakdown of proteins, there's the breakdown of cells, there's the viruses and all sorts of things that we come into contact with that are being secreted and collected in our system constantly. But the lymphatic system and the circulatory system and the immune system, because that's all moving as we're awake, and when we are in that awakened state, those toxins are able to kind of pass through our system as we are in that awakened state. But for the brain, where that same level is occurring, there's that same low-level degradation and breakdown of proteins and all sorts of things on that level, it's not able to be cleared and to have its toxins secreted in the same way that the rest of our body can in the waking state. So we need to be entering into that sleep state so that the toxins, the toxic buildup, the toxic load in our brains can be secreted and can actually be taken care of and taken into the system and out through our emunctories, which are our organs responsible for excretion. So that's the primary function of us being asleep. And what they're finding as well is that if there isn't enough sleep happening, so if those toxins, that damaged DNA and those damaged proteins are not being secreted from the brain and are not able to exit the brain, then that causes debris buildup, just like anything else in the body. If there are too many toxins in the liver and there's no way for the toxins to get out because you've got blockages or your whole system is so full of toxins that there's just nowhere for it to go, then the liver will begin to break down. The liver will no longer function properly because its toxic load is too great. And what is being suggested here is that if we're not allowing ourselves to sleep and those toxins are building up in our brains, then that is going to massively increase our chances of experiencing something like Alzheimer's or dementia or some kind of brain disease or loss of memory that often occurs later in life. So they're linking that with the debris that's building up in the brain and is not able to be secreted and is not able to exit the body. Importance of sleep. So if you're sleeping properly and you're allowing yourself to go through that full flush out process, then you're more likely to wake up with a clear mind. And I'm sure if you guys feel into your own experiences, you'll be able to feel what I'm talking about here. You know, if you don't get enough sleep, and I know this is the case for me, if I don't get enough sleep and I've only had a few hours where I needed 8, I need 8, I'm one of those people that needs at least 8, then I wake up and I feel groggy and I can't see properly and everything's blurry and it's a bit of a fuzz and I can't fully engage with what's happening around me because it feels like there's a cloud over my brain, there's a cloud over my head, and I can't quite break through that fuzz. And I've said that it feels like my body has attempted to secrete toxins into my system and hasn't gone through that full flush out process, literally feeling hungover and toxic and dirty from not having enough sleep. And I really believe that that's because my brain hasn't been able to go through its full process of releasing all of the toxins that have accumulated there from the day before, or I've partially gone through the process of getting the spinal fluid in there and washing all those toxins around in there, but haven't actually been asleep long enough to allow those toxins to be secreted or to allow that spinal fluid to move out. So, and then there's the opposite experience. When you've had a really good night's sleep, and it doesn't matter how groggy you were when you went to sleep the night before, you wake up and it's like, oh, I can see and I can engage with the world and things are bright and I can think clearly and I can integrate information and I can engage. And that's because there isn't that toxic buildup in the brain. It's gone through that full process of flushing out. So when I heard that, when I read that, I just thought that you guys should probably hear that, because that's an important part of taking care of your health and taking care of your mental health as well. Because when you're in that groggy, disconnected, disjointed state, it becomes very difficult to deal with and to manage what's happening in the physical life. And so the emotional and mental impacts of that are going to be enormous, and rightly so. So for us to be clear and to be able to properly engage with life in the way that is appropriate, that sleep is so essential. And I'm going to suggest here that clearing out, so that degradation and that toxic buildup and that flushing out that happens on the physical level while we sleep, because it does also happen systemically in the rest of the body. I'm just not talking about that as the main point in this. And again, some of that flushing out and that clearing and that cleansing can happen through the day for the rest of the physical body. It's not only at night that happens, though that is a key time for it. I want to suggest that flushing out process is also happening for us on an emotional, mental, and perhaps even a spiritual level. And I'm sure, again, if you guys feel into your own experiences, you'll be able to feel what I mean. You can be really, really down and in a really bad way, and then you go to sleep and you wake up and you feel okay again. Not always, but it can be the experience that it's almost like you've gone through an emotional or a mental cleansing in the sleep state. And I want to suggest that accumulation of toxins and useless cells on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level happens on those levels as well. So things that you no longer need, things that no longer serve you, things that are damaged or impacted by life through you moving through life, they kind of accumulate and collect on these other levels as well as toxins, emotional, mental, spiritual toxins. And by allowing ourselves to sleep and to go into a state of cleansing and clearing and regeneration, damage control, we're much more likely to be allowing there to be the time and the space for those physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual toxins to be washed away, to be cleansed, to actually exit the bodies and be secreted and released as something that can be useful somewhere else but is no longer useful to us. And for that alone, I think it's important for all of us to be making sure that we're getting enough sleep. And the amount of sleep that's required is different for everyone. As a general rule, 8 hours But for some people it's 6, for some people they need a little bit more than 8, and we've got to experiment and find what works for us. But I think there's a lot of people out there who are running on much less sleep than what their system actually requires to actually be going through this regeneration and this cleansing process. And again, there's a lot that we can do. It's like what I talked about in the beginning of the video. Managing the stress component is an essential part of it. But then there's a lot that we can do, and it depends who you want to see. There's a lot that the acupuncturist can do for you, a lot that the physiotherapist can do for you, the chiropractor, your GP, your kinesiologist, your naturopath, whatever, whoever it is that you're seeing, whatever massage therapist, whoever it is that you're seeing for these issues, there's a lot that they can do. And as naturopaths, there's a lot that we can do. We can introduce or increase the hormones that are necessary for that sleep to happen. We can introduce proteins that are essential in creating those hormones so that you can sleep at night. We can introduce all sorts of herbs whose sole purpose is to sedate and to relieve stress and allow the body to go into a sleep state. There's all sorts of supplements and things that are out there that are really, really useful for assisting the body to get to sleep, and that's for you guys to explore. It's for you to go and see whoever it is that works best for you, and to go through that process of discovering what is going to work for you. And again, essential, reducing the stress in the daytime as well, and again doing whatever you need to do on a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual level to reduce that stress and to allow yourself to come more into a state of equanimity and calm assurance and groundedness, and not being so triggered and fired up by what's happening in your environment, and helping you to work through anything that may need to be worked through in your physical environment, in your day-to-day livings. But there's also just some really simple things. Your yoga teacher will be able to help you as well, because I'm just thinking of these nice yogic practices like putting your legs up the wall for 10 minutes before you go to sleep. All sorts of things that just calm the central nervous system and help you to get ready to move into that sleep state. Again, you go and explore. But I just want to talk about some really general, really simple tips that I give some of my clients. And to help clients to be sleeping, I really like to get them into a rhythm with it, so that there's a bit of a pattern that happens every night when they are getting ready to go to bed, a process that they're going through that kind of triggers and tells the body, tells the nervous system that, hey, we're in the process of getting ready for bed. We're about to lay down. It's time to start winding down and getting ready for the night's sleep that is ahead of us. And often what I do with clients is I suggest that, sleep hygiene is so important just as a place to start. So making sure that you're away from screens, away from devices, at least for an hour before you go to bed. Making sure that there isn't noise and light and chaos in the bedroom, clutter, mess, things like that kind of cause the nervous system to clench up a bit and to be a little bit on edge. But creating an environment where the nervous system's like, yeah, man, we're safe. We're okay. We can relax. We can be vulnerable here. We can expose ourselves, because a lot of the time there's fear around sleep. Because when you're asleep, you're unconscious. Anything could happen. Anything could go wrong. What if something happens and you miss it, or someone breaks in, or something bad happens? And so clearing that fear and just, okay, we're safe, we're calm, this is our sacred space, this is where we are safe, this is where we go to relax and to be vulnerable and to be authentic, and we're okay in this space. But setting up a routine, and I like to do it for an hour before going to bed, and essentially, ideally, you'd be in bed by 10 p.m, bit earlier if you could, but 10 p.m. is a good time, because that's between 10 and 12 is when the really, really good quality sleep happens. But again, we just have to start with markers for people and work our way back to that time. Often it's like, okay, just aim for 11:30, and once you've got that, then we'll bring it back, and we'll slowly bring it back to 10 or something that is even better for you. But wherever you can start is a good place. So an hour before bed, I often get my clients to make themselves a nice sleepy tea. So there's some really nice herbs that are good for calming the nervous system and helping you to feel relaxed and ready for sleep. And it's not even necessarily the therapeutic effects of these herbs that I want the clients to be getting into their bodies. That's part of it, but it's more having a routine. So when I put the kettle on at 9 p.m., that indicates to me I'm getting ready to go to bed. This is the start of my wind down cycle, and I'm getting ready to go into a sleep state. So I put the kettle on, I brew my tea. While I'm brewing my tea, I go and put my pajamas on, and I brush my teeth, and I do whatever it is that I need to do to get ready to go to sleep. And then I take my cup of tea, my warm cup of tea that's indicating special me time, time to just be with me and to relax and wind down and kind of reflect on the day and get ready for what the next day is going to be. And I go and I sit in my sacred space, and I be in my bedroom where I'm going to be sleeping, and I turn all screens off, no screens on, and then you take that time, so that hour that you have before you go to bed, to slowly sip your tea, to some people like to journal, some people just like to sit and meditate, some people like to listen to really soothing music, whatever it is that helps you to wind down. It's like you've got this hour of time just to be with you. It may mean processing what's happened through the day, so just going through a nightly review, reviewing on what's happened through the day and coming to peace with what's happened through the day, so you can actually let it go and leave it where it is instead of trying to drag it into the sleep state with you where it causes you to be panicked and restless. So really just marking the start of that hour with turning the kettle on, and then ending that hour with turning the lights off and being in bed ready to sleep, and then taking that hour to read, to meditate, to journal, to reflect, to check in, whatever it is that is going to help you to feel calm for that time. And sometimes just something as simple as having a routine like that, having that little bit of time where you spend just being still and quiet, can be enough to help you to feel calm enough and to feel ready to move into that sleep state. You might want to spend that hour with your legs up the wall. Whatever it is that helps you to calm and to relax and to recuperate and regenerate and let go of what's happened through the day, because too many of us are trying to drag things along with us that should just be left where they happened. You don't have to drag it with you into the sleep state and into the next day and into the next month and into the next year. If you take that time to just be still and to reflect and ponder and review, then you can just leave it where it happened and wake up the next day fresh, greeting that day anew, greeting yourself anew, greeting other people anew, greeting the planet anew, and you'll be more in a space where you will be able to do that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. Just talking about the importance of sleep and what you get out of sleep, and just really, really simple tips on helping to calm and get ready for that sleep state. And we all need it. Please do whatever you need to do to improve the quality of and perhaps the length of the sleep that you are having. And enjoy exploring that and seeing where that takes you.